It is Thursday, October 26, 2023. And folks, you are watching or listening to the MMA Eco live podcast, live on YouTube. I am your host every single week, Chris Presnell, owner of MMA Ecosystem, reporting on Asian MMA day in, day out. And here we are, episode 31 of the podcast. So glad you could join me. The way this works, know all of you that are regulars are tuning this part out, but going to go down the Asian MMA schedule for the weekend, highlight prospects, fights, events that I think you should know about. And this week, what I'm going to do is I'm going to give special attention to one event, and I'll tell you why in a second. But as the podcast is going, you can drop your questions in the chat, and I will get to those in a second. It can be about anything that's on your mind. Of course, I specialize in Asian MMA, but anything that is on your mind, you can drop it in the chat. And yeah, moderators, appreciate your help as usual, your service. I salute you. But yeah, let's get into it. So there is so much. Guys, have you seen how much Asian MMA is going on this weekend? I feel like these weekends where the UFC doesn't have an event, kind of like everyone just sort of retreats and we forget that it's actually like this is still a really big weekend, especially for Asian MMA. There's like way too much for me to go over in this podcast. And so I'm not going to go over most of it. I am going to try and name at least all the events that are on my radar. And then, but yeah, there's so much going on. Got Road FC, got WLF, got Matrix Fight Night, so much more. But yeah, I'm pumped. I'm pumped for it. Hopefully Saturday morning, I'm going to have like multiple windows open and watching Matrix Fight Night. Every single time they have an event, I try to figure it out how to watch it. To see if I can get a VPN going or whatnot, but never seems to work out. At one point, some folks with Matrix Fight Night were like going to hook me up with a stream, but something about that didn't work. I don't know what happened. So yeah, I know some folks have talked about like, it'd be great if, actually it was a Kaposa on Twitter was like, yeah, it'd be great if these guys could get on a UFC Fight Pass. And I'm like, well, yeah, obviously that'd be great. Like they don't have anything close to like expanding into that market, like that South Asia, India market on UFC Fight Pass. That would obviously be amazing. But the problem is that as far as I'm concerned, Matrix Fight Night, at least so far, has been a promotion that wants to build their brand. And with the Fight Pass contracts, what I've been told is that there's an option in those Fight Pass contracts for the UFC to be like, hey, we want to sign this fighter, so that automatically voids your contract, your exclusive contract with this fighter, kind of gives the UFC access to your roster. And it seems like Matrix Fight Night is wanting to build their own brand and not just be this like halfway point. I think I talked about this last week, but so yeah, I don't know if that's ever going to happen or if they'll eventually just, man, I wish they could even just have it on YouTube and geo-block India if that's what they really want to do, so that the rest of us can watch it. But the Schroffs had told me a couple months ago when I interviewed them that they were going to announce plans for an international broadcaster and they were going to let me know about it first. And I was like, great, but haven't heard anything. So, and there's nothing going on. So Matrix Fight Night, I'll get to that in a second. I actually filmed a whole video of a breakdown for Matrix Fight Night, but for some reason, I think I figured out I have two microphones, well, technically three, and one of those microphones I think is bad. So I was like, yeah, gosh darn it, I can't refilm this in time. And so I just thought, well, I'll kind of just condense it down and then share with you guys some thoughts I had on the card. So yeah, all good. But let's go. Let me mention a couple things first. If you have not already, would love it if you would give the video a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel. My goal is to put out a video a week, and then I put out shorts like several times a week, giving you little short news updates. So trying to keep this YouTube channel active, providing valuable content, so would appreciate that. But let's talk about tomorrow, Friday. So on Friday, we've got a couple things. We've got one Friday Fights 38. Got a gentleman from India named Deepak Bardwaj, 2-0 Indian fighter, fighting on the card. Also got Mark Abelardo out of Philippines. So those two Asian guys on the card. And then winner of the best MMA promotion name in the business, we've got Happy Elephants Champions League coming at you from one of my favorite cities in the world, Nanjing, China, place I got to spend some time. There's two fighters that I want to call attention to. The main event of this event, which might actually be airing on YouTube, they have like a pretty strong YouTube presence. I don't know about audience, but they're very active on their YouTube channel. So I've looked over their articles talking about their event on their WeChat, but I haven't seen any like stated broadcast plans. Let me know if you know something I don't, but hopefully they air on YouTube. The main event is kind of a big one. It's Japanese prospect Miki Motono versus big Chinese prospect Feng Xiaozan. Probably like top 3 women's prospects outside of the UFC right now is where I put Feng. So that is a big fight. Looking forward to that. I'm glad I thought it was cool that they brought in a Japanese fighter, because honestly, really, there's not many women that are at her level besides like Dong Huaxiang. So yeah, I'm glad that they're able to make that fight happen. And then co-main event, you've got Ari Gala, who has fought for JCK. He's going to be fighting against Tibetan guy Dan Zhonghua Qing Dojie. And then a lot of other names I recognize on that card as well. So pretty solid card for an event that's just, or a league that's just kind of come up in the last 6 months to a year. So that is Happy Elephant Champions League. You can catch the full card listing on Tapology. So that is Friday. Oh, okay, no. There's of course there's more. Second event of a Mongolian promotion called Falcons Fighting Series. I'm still trying to get information on them to put on Tapology. Then you've also got kind of a collab event. I'm kind of confused on who the collab is with, but it's AFC Angels Fighting Championship in South Korea. Got like a collab with a promotion called BIFC, which I think stands for Busan International Fighting Championship. But they've got an event going down in South Korea tomorrow, and there's some decent names on there, and a lot of international names too. Some like Kyrgyz fighters, some Filipino guys. Like I saw Renee Catalan's on there. And then some Japanese fighters as well. So all those fights are Koreans against fighters from either Japan, Kyrgyzstan, or the Philippines. So you gotta check that card out as well. I'm trying to get to as many of these as I can just for the interest of time. But the Friday show that I also want to highlight is WLF. And I'll go straight to JCK. So check this card from WLF. Kind of curious to see what's next from them, because for a while they've been doing this like China versus X country kind of fight card. Brazil, Mongolia, Russia, South Korea. So now they have brought back some of these fighters. It's kind of like all of them in a way. And here's the fight card that I just finished adding today to Tapology. The main event, you've got Huang Yele fighting against UFC veteran Reginaldo Vieira. Mentioned that fight last week on the podcast. Another really big prospect that you should keep an eye on is Feng Tian Hao. He's a flyweight. He's going to be fighting this Mongolian guy, Sensuren Bat Iridwe. We also got Karen Wiley, Mai Tito Hutti on the card, fighting a Korean guy, Moon Gi-bum. And then some other decent names. This guy I've got my eye on too, Zachio Doji as well, Tibetan guy out of Umbo Fight. So a lot of interesting fights on the card, some Korean top team guys on there. Huang, I mean, he's kind of fought down, I'll be honest, a little bit his last couple fights, but this fight, I feel like he's fighting up a tad bit, which I think is great. This guy's got twice his experience. He's got UFC experience, really good grappler. And Vieira has made a big point to state that he wants to knock Kwang Yela out at WLF 69. So some big fights going down on this card. Looking forward to it. I will have those results up for you tomorrow. All right, so that concludes Friday. And then going into JCK, the other third Chinese event this weekend. Not a whole lot going on this card that I'll mention, although the main event is kind of an unfortunate byproduct of JCK's tournament format, but at the same time, significant just because they're two of the better fighters in the welterweight division fighting in China right now. It's Ding Meng against Korban Zhang Tulosibiaka. These guys are fighting for the third time, and Korban Zhang has won both times. Ding Meng, a guy out of Xi'an, another one of my favorite cities in the world. Ding Meng, 0-2 against Korban Zhang. Korban Zhang is on this insane 10-fight win streak. You look at his record, it's not all that impressive. He's 29 wins, 13 losses, took 10 L's in a row at one point. But he's been on this crazy win streak, and I don't know what's next for him if he wins this. I mean, he's been on a tear, and he's still fairly young. So, when you talk about road to UFC non-tournament fights or welterweights, who's out there in the welterweight division? This is a guy. This is definitely a guy. And this is for a belt. So whoever wins this fight will keep the belt and defend it against future challengers. So significant in that regard. Co-main event of that is Zheng Boqie versus Cai Xiongxiong at flyweight. All right. So that is JCK. Also, we've got dual events in Bali, Indonesia. Island Fighters League and Canggu. I don't know. Is that pronounced Canggu Fight Night? I'm actually going to try to start learning some Indonesian here soon. I'm really, really crossing my fingers and actually kind of have a plan to go to Indonesia next year for a work trip. So I'm going to try to learn a little bit of Indonesian, but first things first, got to learn pronunciation. So I sometimes when I learn Chinese, I just naturally pronounce other languages the same way, which is obviously not correct. So I've sometimes said Canggu Fight Night, but it's probably just Canggu Fight Night. But either way, that is Bali MMA's kind of in-house promotion where they usually put a lot of their guys up against other fighters. It's like a monster card, 20 fights, both Muay Thai and MMA. And it's I would say it's a little bit lower level, which is fine. But there's one Indonesian guy on there, a Bali MMA guy, Yermi Mode Lee. Let's see if we can check out this guy's record. He's one guy that I've got my eye on from this show. 4-0 fighter, trains out of Bali MMA, fights at the athlete division. So yeah, he's 3-0 with One Pride MMA, 1-0 with Canggu Fight Night. That guy I'll have my eye on. And then the shorter card, although I would argue probably the better card, although not really kind of different types of events, but the Island Fighters League card. Originally, they were supposed to have an event I think last month, and I someone internally passed along the whole fight card to me, and I publicized it, and then they got mad at me apparently for sharing that because they wanted to share it their own way. So I was like, whatever, took it down, and then they eventually ended up having to move the event, I think because of some issues with the venue. So they moved it, but a pretty solid card. It's a very international card. Some Koreans. You've got Kim Jong-gook versus Naris Bartoska in the main event. Shannon Wiratchai from Thailand is on that card. Wildman, Alison Barbosa, Brazil's on there. And then, some Filipino guys. Kunchan, a Thai guy from Thailand is on there, who I think he's 4-0. So some pretty solid fights. Check out, I don't know if that fight card is up on Tapology. I haven't actually looked, but check it out on their social media if you want a whole rundown of the card. Don't know if they have a broadcast plan just yet. A lot of these kind of promotions, they're not going to be like if, Island Fighter League 2, if they air, it's going to be on YouTube or on Facebook. It's not going to be anything big, most likely not a pay-per-view. So if at all. So there's that. That's Indonesia. Saturday, you've also got Naiza FC 54. In the evening, or I guess on Sunday, technically, you've got Road FC 66. That should be fun. That's the finals of their annual tournament. And yeah, you've got a Kim So Chul on the card. Love that Road FC picked him up. Here's that card for you. So that starts early in the morning, East Coast, 10 p.m. on Saturday evening on the West Coast here in the U.S. But yeah, look at that. You've got Kim So Chul against Akira Haraguchi. I'm a little confused because we didn't put the little brackets for the other fights. Yang Ji-yong, prospect I've had my eye on as well. Rajab Shadulayev. I think this guy actually has 2 fights booked. Look at this crazy guy. Okay, 9-0 Kyrgyz fighter, 23 years old. Okay, I was pretty sure he had another fight booked. Oh no, he just fought at that's what it was. He just fought at UAE Warriors last week. This crazy guy. Now he's going to Korea to fight Bruno Azevedo in the finals of this. Absolutely crazy. He can pull that off. I mean, there's like a top Kyrgyz prospect right there. He'd be 10-0. So Road FC, I'll try to catch at least part of that as much as I can. So yeah, looking forward to that. All right, let's get into Matrix Fight Night. I'll try not to keep this too long because love the questions. But okay, Matrix Fight Night. This goes down on Saturday from New Delhi, India. And there's 2 title fights. I know, like, I don't know how much my Indian listener base is with this podcast, but I'm bringing it up because there are some international fights. There's fighters from Kyrgyzstan and Korea and yeah, you can see here Afghanistan, Nepal. Really, like, I mean, October, I've really kind of focused the month a lot of my content on Indian MMA because it's been a big month for Indian MMA. We had Anshul Jubli, we've got Matrix Fight Night. So been putting out a lot of content on that. I'll just kind of touch on a few things. The main event here is between Shyam Anand versus Sanjit Boudoir. This is the second time these 2 guys have fought. The first time they fought, Sanjit finished off Shyam Anand with punches in the first round. And that was his first loss in first fight. And since then, Shyam Anand has gone undefeated. He is 4-0, all of his wins by knockout within 2 rounds. So he has gotten much better, very good fighter. Shyam Anand, really just like kind of a monster truck kind of guy. Sanjit has been consistent as well. His only losses are to really good guys, lost to Anshul Jubli. So Sanjit is one of these guys, fights behind a long jab. He's fought five whole rounds before and manages his gas tank pretty well. So 2 very different styles here between Sanjit and Shyam Anand. But a lot of people say outside of Anshul Jubli, these are 2 of the best fighters out of India right now. So I would think especially the guy that wins this fight could cement himself as like the best Indian fighter or outside the UFC, especially on the male side. So definitely a big fight to watch if you can watch it. If not, then check the results from Matrix Fight Night, social media, or my own. Looking forward to that. In the co-main event, you've got Darhanbek Ergashev defending his welterweight title against Jason Solomon. This fight was supposed to be a trilogy fight between Jason Solomon and Road to UFC veteran Pawan Mon, but Mon had to withdraw from the fight, and that was a non-title fight. Stepping up to defend his belt is Ergashev. So now this event now has 2 title fights. Lucky for the fans, but I think this will be. It is kind of weird that like Solomon wasn't scheduled to fight for a title, and now he all of a sudden is. I think that this is going to be a semi-one-sided fight. Solomon's a little bit older. Ergashev is much younger. He's much faster. Solomon is a very exciting guy. Just kind of when the fight starts, just runs at you with a bunch of haymakers and tries to take you out. Ergashev fights behind a really strong 1-2 and also has a lot of knockout power. So I think Ergashev probably going to win this fight by knockout in the first round, if not then in the second round. But I think it should be a really entertaining fight for as long as it lasts. We've also got Abdul Azim Badakshi on the card fighting against Korean Park Hae-jin. And this is a very interesting as well. As I was doing research on Park, because I wasn't totally familiar with him, he's an interesting guy, really good grappler, but not a very explosive athlete. He's moves a little bit slower, I'll be honest, but is pretty durable, takes a lot of damage, but is one of those guys that will take a lot of damage and then submit you in the third round. So he's very crafty. He has some decent boxing skills, but against Badakshi, I mean, Badakshi is just the kind of guy that's like, he's a ragdoll you kind of guy. So he's going to be all over Park, and I think he's probably going to break Park and finish him in the first, if not second round, with some form of ground and pound. But yeah, Badakshi, if you're unfamiliar with him, he's got a very good Greco-Roman wrestling background, loves like kind of those upper body tosses to the ground, and then really just keeps striking at you from every single position. So yeah, a very talented athlete, was supposed to be on road to UFC this year, but couldn't because of visa issues. And striking, it could get interesting. I mean, Badakshi, he doesn't really throw a lot of straight punches. And so I think he's going to be in range of Park's boxing. What's going on there? Oh, my goodness. Oh, my goodness. Come on. All right, and we're back. We're back. All right. So yeah, Badakshi. I think he's probably going to break. Probably going to break down Park and win the fight by TKO. Elsewhere on the card, you've got Yuki Dembe from Nepal. Looking forward to see his development as a prospect. He's been training at Soma Fight. Also fought for Cage Warriors several times, even as an amateur. A big fight that's kind of right in the middle here is Govind Singh versus Clinton DeCruz. I would think if Clinton wins this fight, honestly, whoever wins this fight will probably get a shot at the flyweight belt next. These are two of the best flyweights out of India right now. Govind just came back and finished Rama Supandi at One Pride MMA last June. Whereas Clinton DeCruz is he's a grappler, really good, crafty, slick jiu-jitsu, and works behind a jab. I think Clinton will probably take this fight, but this is one of the hardest ones for me to pick, just because Govind, honestly, he's a really strong, muscular guy and has really pretty good wrestling. So I don't know how that's going to match up with Clinton's style, but I am interested for sure to see how this fight goes. Probably, like I said, flyweight title shot awaiting the winner. All right. Definitely other fighters that could make an impression on this card. You see a lot of fighters with some decent records. Arshian Maman. I've heard things about this Bon Jovi guy. Sonam Zomba also just took a split decision over Jojo Rajkumari. So yeah, and Sahil Rana, another really good fighter, fighting Georgi Stojanovic. That should be a great fight. So Matrix Fight Night 13, really, I mean, a lot of good stuff. Even like if it's not the most high level of a fight, should at least be really entertaining. Hopefully I get to watch it, and hopefully Matrix Fight Night shares at least highlights that we can share around. So, all right, that does it for Matrix Fight Night 13. Let me slide this over a little bit. All right. Yeah, apologize for the drop off there. I've been in a kind of a whirlwind today and forgot to plug in my silly little battery. So, all right, going to your questions. Love kicking us off with some positivity. Too much negativity in the world. Be nice. Racism and negative comments towards people will be blocked. Absolutely. So Sammy's saying, I've been on the forums looking on what people are saying about Anshul Jubli, and it's not good. Yeah. How come his culture, home country, is being attacked after a loss? What do you think of the UFC's ignorance on putting an Indian on an Abu Dhabi card where they know there are geopolitical issues? Why subject someone that talented to abuse? I've like, I'm not someone who like, I don't really like spend a lot of time on like social aspects of the internet per se. So I haven't seen probably as much as what you have, but what I've seen is mainly just like after the fight was over, the event was over, I was just kind of, you know, it ended much earlier in the day. So in the evening time, I was like, man, I'm going to make a video real quick on, you know, Anshul Jubli fight. So mainly just to hopefully like put some wind back in the sails of Indian fight fans and give some perspective of like, hey, like, I mean, this is, you can't expect your first fighter that you have a lot of like hope, like, you know, you're the second fighter from India that's going to the UFC. He's probably not going to be the guy to like make a run and win the belt. Like, it might take more time for an Indian fighter to do that, just because it's kind of just the way MMA cultures develop. And you know, Anshul Jubli should have the freedom to just kind of walk his own journey. It's okay if he takes some L's. It's okay if he has to figure some things out, recalibrate. Still a young guy in his career. And the video, it was like 2 nights later, got a couple thousand views. And I looked at some of the comments on the video. I didn't, because there was like 30 comments on the video. And I didn't read all of them just because I was like, oh boy. But I was just really baffled. I feel like there's like been this weird attitude whenever I talk about Indian MMA, there'll be like, I don't know if they're actual MMA fans or what, but like I'll get comments from people that I suspect are Indian, live in India, something, whatever. But there's a lot of pushback towards like, yeah, man, like MMA in India, it's never going to be big. It's our athletes aren't that good. Like just a lot of like negativity on I don't know, this doesn't, I know like this doesn't apply to everyone, but I do see a lot of that. And it just seems really odd to me why you would like take the time to go online and like spread that kind of negativity. Even, I mean, about anybody, but like, I just thought that was really strange. And one guy was just like commenting about how, yeah, our athletes actually aren't that good. We're too poor of a people to like be able to, afford good training, things like that. And just, and again, I know that's just like, that's that guy's opinion, but I do see a lot of, I think I'm kind of catching what you're talking about. And I feel like I'm the kind of person, it's like, if I have some like really negative thoughts towards like a person or an athlete, I'm just going to keep those to myself, and I'm not going to spread them on the internet and inject that toxicity into the water. But other people feel differently. But yeah, I mean, Anshul Jubli, he's, I hope for his sake, he's not really spending a whole lot of time on social media, because that's the dark side of like having this really big following, is like people can turn against you. And I was like, yeah, guys, please, like, don't unfollow people just because they lose one fight. Like, stick with them. Like, if you're an Indian person and you're rooting for your someone from your home country, I know there's a lot of different people groups within India, a lot of different religions, things like that. But so I know there's a lot more complexity, and too. I know people come at these from different perspectives, but yeah, I don't understand it either. And being an American from the U.S., like we don't like, unless maybe it's the Olympics, we don't really like, or we have like, unless we have some team that's like gone really far in the World Cup or something, like we don't really support our own athletes from like a nationalistic standpoint that often. I mean, sometimes, but not that often. It's not like you're going to go to a UFC event in Brooklyn and see a bunch of people flying US flags, and so I realized like where I come from, things are a little bit different. But yeah, very interesting, right? I still haven't totally cracked that, figure out what's going on there. So last week asked about media hyperbole. The example I have is Khamzat, even after doing really well against Usman and having a competitive fight, seeing MMA fighting on, talking about how he's unbeatable. I've also seen a lot of media members campaign for Dricus du Plessis. I really have. And I think because I think there's a lot of media members that are like, yeah, his performance was impressive against a very good fighter in Kamaru Usman, who's a pound for pound ranked fighter, but he was a most likely injured welterweight moving up on 10 days notice, and you took him to a majority decision, whereas Dricus, a more natural middleweight, kind of a long-standing middleweight, took out Robert Whittaker in 2 rounds, not really competitive. And so the title, and he was supposed to get the title fight, so it should go. I have seen some media campaigning for that, and that's how I feel too, is that Dricus should get the shot, even though I wouldn't be as upset with Khamzat getting the title fight this time as I maybe would in other similar situations. I feel like Khamzat has kind of been like hovering at the top. It's been hovering at the top of welterweight for a while, and title shot has kind of been like something we've been flirting with for a while. Think about like Conor McGregor. Think about his path to the title. Like, it was extremely short. He did not beat a lot of ranked guys, and no one really cared. That's kind of how I feel. Like, I don't really care, but I don't know. I don't see a lot of people claiming that he's like somehow unbeatable. I mean, I've also heard a lot of people in the media saying like, yeah, if it was a 5-round fight, maybe Usman could have won that, just because Chimaev has not really shown like a big propensity to go long, to be able to like put out the same level of offense and attack over 15 minutes, whereas Usman was kind of starting to crank up the temperature as the fight went on. It was getting better and better. So is Khamzat Chimaev a future champion? I think so. I do think so. I don't know if it'll be against Sean Strickland in his next fight, just because Strickland seems like kind of a bad matchup for Chimaev in some ways. But I do think that Chimaev is a future champion at some point. But when and against whom, yet to be seen for sure. I don't know if you watch Lex Fridman podcast with John Danaher. He had an interesting take on the GOAT debate. Who you believe to be the GOAT of MMA says more about your character than the person you choose. Do you agree with that sentiment, or at least find it interesting? Well, since the GOAT conversation, and I feel like we've been putting little chapters in this conversation, throughout this podcast, who you think is the GOAT reflects what you value, right? We saw that this year with John Jones, Islam Makhachev, and Alexander Volkanovski. Some people have been adamant that John Jones is number one, has always been number one. Other people adamant that Islam Makhachev, by virtue of activity and not losing, is the main two arguments would say he is number one. Other people have said Volkanovski, although no one's really saying that now that he lost to Makhachev last weekend. But for a while, even after the two fought last February, a lot of people were saying that Volkanovski was number one because he fought to a semi-close decision against someone up a weight class who was probably also in the top 3 space. And Makhachev really doesn't have the opportunity to go down and fight Volkanovski just because the most likely not able to cut that kind of weight. So you see what different people value because of that. I think most people, I would say the majority of people after last Saturday are saying Makhachev. And I think that's where I stand too. I think I was John Jones for a while, but I feel like my values have changed. And this is where it's all about values, what you just said, rather than this like immutable criteria that we're basing it on. Other people don't even have the conversation at all. Other people think that it's totally pointless. And I think that it is kind of a pointless conversation, but it's also an inevitable conversation that is going to happen. And if I kept saying, I don't want to talk about pound for pound, some of you all would keep asking me about it. I promise you that. So that's how I feel about it. And because of that, I am just kind of reluctantly like, okay. And it really is kind of like with your gut, I feel like a lot of it. And so what it says about you as a person, I would say, do you have this like intangible sense of greatness, or do you? So I would say that's more off of your tuition, and then versus that, I would say more about like your logical mind. And so if you're trying to pick between John Jones and Islam Makhachev, the reality is that John Jones has not hardly fought he's fought once at heavyweight. In the last 3.5 years, he's fought once against Cyril Gane. Really good fighter, but not a pound for pound name. And before that, in 2020, 2019, he was going to split decisions against guys like Thiago Santos and Dominic Reyes, decent fighters, but not really in like that top of the game space right now. And so like, how do you evaluate that? It was like, are we still saying John Jones is the best because of his virtually undefeated record and how he performed even earlier than that? I feel like if you're claiming John Jones is the pound for pound best, which there's an argument for that. There definitely is. I don't think you're crazy for feeling that way, but I would say you're someone. I would say it's more. You're saying that more from your intuition and your gut than being able to look more like logically at the. And by logically, I don't mean better, but by logically, I just mean you're someone that's more likely to like. Okay, well, Islam Makhachev, he's more like recent, he's more active. This is his recent resume. It's much easier to like give an on paper resume list of this is what he's done for me lately. Whereas for John Jones, you're just kind of saying like, I feel like his skill and ability is best. I just feel that his skills and abilities are the best, regardless of his activity and USADA stuff and all that. So if you guys are familiar with like Myers-Briggs, you're familiar with those words. But yeah, kind of those two categories of thinking, or it's like thinking versus feeling, sensing and intuition. Those are these two binaries. So yeah, I don't think one is better than the other. You can make a stronger argument. I think now I side with the Makhachev being pound for pound #1 side. But yeah, very interesting for sure. Yes, you sent me that fight, and I've started watching. I haven't finished it, but really enjoyed what I saw. But I have started watching it for sure. So. How come nobody asked Dana, Justin Gaethje, Kamaru Usman, or Khamzat about Kadyrov and their connection to the UFC? Why don't they? So a little while ago, I think it was when Kadyrov got the sanctions from the US, the UFC put out a statement basically saying like, hey, we don't have any like direct connection to Ramzan Kadyrov. Yes, we have fighters that are connected to him, but we are free from any of this. Like, we're not connected to anything politically here. And so I think that's kind of their stance, is like, yeah, we don't have any connection to Ramzan Kadyrov. So fighters can do what they want, but like, but we don't have that. These are our independent contractors. And there's, I don't know if I'm not sure if anyone has asked Khamzat or Kamaru. I saw, it's so funny. I think it was someone, I forget how it started, but basically someone on Twitter I saw like basically like pissed off Justin Gaethje and kind of implicating him in all of that, talking about Ramzan Kadyrov, and like Justin Gaethje was basically just like, I think he was tweeting back at Luke Thomas, was just like, yeah, nobody likes you, Luke. If you like, I have a totally different experience going to Chechnya and being treated really well, and being able to inspire all these young kids. And yeah, we went to the birthday party for his sons, all that, like, kind of like, well, they treated me really well. This like amazing athlete that, my manager's buddies with Kadyrov, and kind of like, well, they treated me well, so surely they couldn't treat any, surely they're not like doing sketchy things like killing people of different sexual preferences. Surely they can't be doing that. They treated me really well. So I just thought that was really funny, almost like sarcastic in a way, like comically sarcastic. But part of it is like, I think it's the Ali Abdelaziz effect. You ask about that. If you're interviewing one of those guys, you ask about Kadyrov, then say goodbye to access to all of those fighters if you're in the media. Probably why you like, I mean, I know he doesn't do all interviews, but like Luke Thomas, you never see him interviewing an Ali Abdelaziz fighter. And yeah, you hear about like James Lynch and how guys from Dominance MMA have treated James Lynch, just like really like childish, petty threats of violence, just like yeah, very like insecure and silly ways that they've treated James Lynch because he's like, he doesn't even know what he's done wrong. And so, like anyone in the media asks about that connection, then you're going to have Ali against you, all of his guys against you, and you're never going to be able to access any of those fighters. So I think that's probably why. I think that's your answer. Do I think that Josh Van versus Kevin Borjas is a good fight that favors Josh Van? Yes. I don't know if you remember Josh Van versus Jumagulov, but he looked really good with his forward pressure in that fight. Oh yeah, he did. I think that's a little bit of a perplexing matchup. I thought that they would try and put Josh Van against someone not making their flyweight debut, not making their UFC debut. Borjas is a really young guy, so there's that. But I feel like Josh Van is a couple levels above him. At the same time, no harm in just giving Josh Van a couple more fights before he fights someone really, really good. So I don't really have, I guess, any complaints about that. It should be I think it will be a really entertaining fight. The Jumagulov fight was a great fight, and against Borjas, I think that should be really exciting too. Probably I would pick Josh Van to get a finish in that fight. But yeah, I thought about doing a breakdown of that fight, but haven't totally decided yet. But yeah, really looking forward to that one for sure. My opinion on Wu Yanan. She gets mistreated on Chinese social media platforms for a record in the UFC. Justified or not, I don't think so, but there might be a different angle. I think she just entered the UFC too young is the thing. I think that really is what it is. And if she would have entered the UFC around the age of 29 or 30 after she had been at like a bigger gym for a while, I think that things would have looked a little bit differently. And yeah, I just think she was a little bit too green. So I don't, I've been watching to see if there's anything on the radar with her fighting. Honestly, that would be like, well, I guess if she's going to fight at bantamweight, that kind of rules that out. Not a lot of options if you're a bantamweight living in Asia. Really not. I don't know who she could fight with. Invicta FC, PFL maybe. Honestly, that may be one of your best bets going up a weight class, but I don't know. I don't know what's next for her. She's been training at places like Tiger Muay Thai. So I don't know if it's an injuries thing or if it's just like take some extended time off before signing any fight contracts. That may be a smart thing to do as well. So yeah, I just think she was a little too green for sure. A good opponent now for Jekka now is that Butler's out. You see UFC maybe signing guys outside the UFC like they always do for him. I think so. Some people have thrown around different options, and people were talking about Paul Hughes from Cage Warriors. I was like, no. Like, yeah, I think he's way too good for Jekka. If the goal here is to give Jekka Sarji an opponent that he is most likely to beat, then I think we got to look outside the UFC for that. That is how I feel. I think the UFC should bring someone in, call up Iridium to give us another fighter like Jesse Butler. But yeah, most likely we're looking at featherweight, and I just don't know who is available that would be like a manageable fight. Jesse Butler seemed like the perfect fight in my opinion, but yeah, Please don't do Paul Hughes. Paul Hughes even like quote tweeted me and was like, put me in. I'm like, no. How about no? I did hear from Jekka. Jekka told me that if he hears anything, he'll let me know. So hopefully you'll hear that from me if anything comes up. A couple of the other guys that I maybe would have recommended, not available. Manolo Zacchini from Italy. Maybe we could do that. Otherwise, yeah, I'd say we're best off signing outside the UFC. Where does Weili stack up in the WMMA GOAT debate, and why does it bring up scam and anger when someone brings her up in GOAT debates on platforms? Ignorance, but where does she stack up in the GOAT? See, now we're going back to that question a couple questions ago about what it says about you. Because do you put Ronda Rousey in the GOAT? I mean, she would get beaten by like most bantamweights today, but what she did for women's MMA and the run that she had through the bantamweights that were available at the time, do you put her up in there? Gotta think the most agreed upon would be like Shevchenko, Joanna, Amanda Nunes, number one. Chris Cyborg's up there. So, and I don't know. Is Rose up there? I don't know, because Rose has 2 wins over Weili. It is very confusing. Maybe even like more confusing than the men's debate, because you have these women that have done these big things, but some of them in other promotions like Chris Cyborg and Bellator and Strikeforce and Invicta fought a couple times for the UFC, but most of her work is outside the UFC. Mona Nunes is probably the only thing that we can all agree on. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, definitely top 10. I would put her at maybe like number 5 or 6. I'd have to like really think through. And again, like pound for pound GOAT versus, you have to, how do you even compare what Rousey did to what Weili has done? Weili coming into an already established division and becoming one of like, either probably like the best female fighter in the UFC right now. I don't know. Top 5. I would say 5 or 6 all time for sure. We talked about this a couple shows ago, but about fight picks and how it's the culture of MMA. But what do you think of cynical analysts like Ghost and Slack who hate the idea of fight predictions? Again, that is just shows what you value, and if you're talking about GOAT, just shows you like some people think that the GOAT conversation is meaningless. Other people think that that's all they want to talk about, but then they have different ideas of what that means. It just goes to show like just what you value and what you like in the sport. So, but it's one of those things that is inevitable. No matter how you feel about things, it's inevitable. You're going to get asked about it. People will message me on Instagram about really random like events in Kazakhstan and be like, "Hey man, trying to bet on this event. What do you think of these odds?" I don't know, man. Like I'm not really in that world, and half these fighters I'm not super familiar with. Looks great. I don't know, but it's like sorry about that. There goes the mic. Either way, people are going to ask you about those things, and it's just a part of the world. So if you're going to rage against it the whole time that you're in the world of MMA media, like it's going to be really unpleasant. So that's why whether you like it or not, you just kind of have to embrace it. Doesn't mean that you have to focus your attention, your content on that. But yeah, that's how I feel. I have found that sometimes leaning into debates or practices like predictions help to widen my scope a little bit through doing predictions. Like I'll do predictions and I'll do these breakdown videos. What that does for me is it forces me to watch MMA in a different way and thinking of it from a different way. And so it's been valuable for me to try and like learn and grow from that. So that's my defense on kind of exploring that side of it for sure. All right, what you got? Clean pun today. The man of the hour, the man with the power to the sweet to be sour. That flew right over. I mean, that was just levels above me. Levels above me. Beautiful. Does Mola Sport ask you for permission to use your tweet? Because sometimes these medias don't. So yeah. No, that was really funny. I was so confused because yeah, they didn't use my permission, but they didn't need to because they quoted me. This was hilarious. So they quoted me. Okay. I just thought this was really funny and I want to see if I can share this. Mola Sport, which is like, I mean, they're the ones that put out all the like UFC Indonesia news. They put out a tweet, or no, an Instagram post. I don't know if I can show it to you. They put out an Instagram post where Paul Hughes checked out or called out Jekka, and it had a screenshot of Paul Hughes' tweet, which was quoting my tweet, and it just like, you know, the title said, Cage Warriors champion calls out Jekka, new opponent found ? And then they were like, via MMA ecosystem. I just thought that was really funny. And because in my tweet, the reason I thought it was funny, because in my tweet, I said, Jekka Sargay needs a new opponent for UFC Fight Night on November 18th as Jesse Butler is out with an injury. Mola Sport reports. So they quoted me quoting them and then said via MMA ecosystem. I just thought that was really funny. And like technically no media rules were broken there. But they didn't, yeah. But I mean that I appreciated that. No, I don't ever see them like take my content. There's been a couple situations in the last week where some MMA media pages, I wouldn't even say source I mean, I guess that some of them do some reporting, but they like basically just like copied and pasted the text from other more prominent media members and then maybe like included the same picture and tweeted it and then didn't even like mention those media members. And then those media members like called them out for it. So like that's been going around a lot the last week too. Some of these like MMA media sites that mainly just like all they really do is repost other things, other sites, which is fine. But I'm more and more, I'm kind of like, rather than just making a new post, I mean, we all do it to an extent, but on somewhere like Twitter, it's like, why don't you just like retweet instead of like, I don't know, just make sure it feeds back to the original source. But yeah, I thought that was interesting. I think that Anshul Jubilee is still talented and good. It's just sad to me to see all the negative stuff thrown at him. Totally. I mean, like, think about rounds 1 and 2. He looked awesome. He definitely won those rounds. We know that for sure from the judges' scorecards that we saw. He looked amazing. I think there was something, I think it was all a mental game in round 3 that just caught him off guard. And just like, I mean, we do our jobs and that's like something that you can fix, you know, like whatever we talked at length on this podcast about Whaley bringing in like, you know, speakers to simulate booze. because that kind of messed with their head when she walked in the first Rose fight. So these are totally things that you can fix, and I really trust the leadership at Soma Fight to be able to work through that. I really do. I do think that like Anshul deserves a lot of credit for that fight. People are saying Mike Breeden sucks. I think he's better than a lot of people give him credit for, and he definitely has like, I don't know. It's like a win's a win. Like you do what you have to do to win, and for him, like his coaches called for that, and it got him the win. I mean, it turned around a fight that he was losing and got him his first UFC win. So like, yeah, big credit to Mike Breeden, but you know, it's something we just got to go back and fix. And Anshul, skill-wise, showed a lot of things. Showed that he is UFC level for sure, for sure. Speaking of Mola, they extended their contract with UFC till 2029. Oh, I didn't see that. Looks like both parties planning something big together. UFC Jakarta, one of them, but more than that as well. Nice. Did not hear that. I'll have to see if I can. I'll have to see if I can find an article on that. Don't even care where Jubilee's from. He's got a fighting style that I like. I don't care where he's from. Talented, give him a chance, for sure. Don't you think it makes MMA fighting a very stale media outlet for talking in hyperbole? Like I've said in our podcast, we understand that anyone can lose in MMA, and that's what makes you interesting to talk to. Probably some of that is just some pressure to create some sort of buzz with the media that you're creating. I was listening to a creator that I often listen to for advice earlier today, and she was saying, I would rather make something that makes 10 people mad than something that everyone feels indifferent to. And I thought that was really interesting. She was like, it doesn't mean that you should go out and be offensive towards people or be disingenuous, but in doing that, you're creating conversation. Logistically, you're creating traffic and feedback, you know, onto your content is one thing. We know that content with more comments on it gets pushed up in algorithms, search criteria, all that. So that's why you see a lot of talk show hosts, talking heads, creating these hot takes that sometimes aren't very good. They don't really care. It's just like, is this going to help us to kind of spark a conversation that people are interested in? So I think that's where it's probably coming from, for sure. Obligatory question about Japanese MMA legends. What do you think Kazushi Sakuraba's impact on the sport, on MMA as a whole? So he was probably, I would say he is like the Royce Gracie of Asian MMA, particularly Japanese MMA. Royce Gracie became this very, very unique icon in the sport of MMA, because not only was he the first guy kind of, you know, from UFC 1 onward, but he was this guy that proved the like core most ethos of jiu-jitsu. And that is that you don't have to be a bigger, stronger guy to win a fight and beat your opponent. Kazushi Sakuraba really kind of did the exact same thing, right? He was this fighter that if he was working in an office job, you maybe wouldn't bat an eye. I mean, he'd be a big guy, but not necessarily like chiseled, but, you know, a tall guy, a thick guy, but, you know, didn't necessarily look like an intimidating force, but had the ability to submit foe after foe after foe. So he was kind of like that Royce Gracie figure, and couple that in with just like with the personality that was both colorful but muted, and in a way I think that also really represents Japanese culture well. Is like Japanese people are typically, usually, they're known for being very respectful people, but also very, very like, what am I trying to say here? I don't want to get myself in trouble. You know, I think of Japanese culture as a very like colorful animated culture. And I think somehow Sakuraba, I'm struggling with words to pinpoint it, but I think he felt like he was like very representative of the heart of Japanese culture, while also representing the heart of like jiu-jitsu, what originally made Royce Gracie popular as well. So I think that's what it is, and I think that's why everyone talks about Sakuraba with so much respect, even today. So yeah, maybe not Paul Hughes. If someone from UFC, guys like Manolo Zacchini or Giannis Gamori would be good. Yeah, that's what I feel like. Talking about Weili talking about 115, her division specifically. For the GOAT debate, what makes this weird is people ignore Rose's losses and overvalue the losses that Weili had to Rose. I don't know. Do they not realize that she's only lost to Rose and got better since, while Rose has been on a 2-fight losing streak with 7 losses on her record? At this point, I'm going to say I don't know. An answer that nobody likes, and I know going back to like, we don't want to be wishy-washy in the media, but that's just how I feel. I don't know. I don't know how to handle that, because I don't know. Both of them have beaten Carla, or no, Carla has beaten Rose twice. It's the triangle. That's what it is. It's the triangle. A beats B, B beats C, C beats A. So how do you stack the 3 parts up to each other? I think we would agree that probably Carla is not number 1 there. I think we can agree on that, but I don't know how to handle that. I agree with you. Yeah, maybe today, if you're just looking at a skill, this goes back to intuition versus logic. My intuition says that Weili is better, but in my logic says Rose is better. So which one wins? I don't know. I don't know. Hopefully they fight a 3rd time at some point. Maybe at flyweight, who knows? But hopefully they fight for a 3rd time. That's all I'll say. I think the narrative that a fighter is very good and influences how people score fights. The narrative that a fighter is very good also influences how people score fights. Some people give Khamzat a 30-26 scorecard, which was impressively not intelligent. Well said. I know. Yeah. I do think that fandom influences how we see fights, and that's something I have been guilty of as well. I'm a fan of fighters. I'm not totally unbiased, and sometimes I will overvalue what my favorite fighter does in a round, and because of that, score the fight for them. I've been guilty of that and tried to get better with that. But I mean, what can you say? Khamzat has a huge fan base, a very passionate fan base as well. So I think you're probably right on that. And then the weirder thing about the GOAT debate on the forum, they think Carla higher than Weili, but lower than Rose. Well, I mean, yeah, that makes no sense. That makes no sense. We know that. We know that's easy to disprove. So, yeah, no way to argue that Carla is better than Weili. And yeah, and with that, guys, thank you so much for tuning in. Really appreciate you guys hopping on. Great stuff today. Really enjoyed talking about all things combat sports and MMA over the last week. Look forward to next week as well. If you made it this far, why not just subscribe? I'll have whenever UFC Shanghai is announced, gosh, should be any second now, right? Maybe it was even announced while we've been having this podcast. But yeah, UFC Shanghai should be announced any day now. I hear they're just waiting on the opponent for Song Yadong to sign a contract. So I think as soon as that happens, they'll announce it. We're at 6 weeks from the event. So it's go time don't know. I mean, at this point, you might as well just announce the event, even if you don't have a main event, if they're confident that they're going to have the event in Shanghai. So yeah, should be any day now, but I'll have a video out reacting to that. Working on a couple other interesting videos that excited to put out there. So subscribe, you'll get first notice on all of that. Appreciate it. But otherwise, take care, guys. Try to catch some of the events this weekend if you can. Road FC, Matrix Fight Night, JCK, WLF, if you are have the means to do so. But otherwise, enjoy your weekend.